Homeless black girl says she will pray for Millionaire. He laughed but cried when he felt healed. Sir, can I pray for you? The sweet voice cut through the Manhattan traffic like a knife through silk. David Harrison stopped abruptly on the sidewalk. His eyes reed from crying, staring at the black girl of about 8 years old. She was sitting on an checkerboard box in front of the Bank of America, her tattered clothes contrasting brutally with the emotional case he was experiencing at that moment. The board meeting had ended exactly 15 minutes ago. 15 minutes since Marcus Webb, his partner of 20 years and best friend since college, had orchestrated the perfect coup. With forged documents and accusations of tax fraud, Marcus had managed not only to remove him from the presidency of Harrison and Associates, but also to freeze all his personal accounts. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I think you've got the wrong person, David muttered, trying to look away from those big sincere eyes. I'm not exactly the kind of person God wants to hear from right now. The girl tilted her head, studying him with a wisdom that seemed impossible for her age. My name is Hope, and God listens to everyone, especially when their heart is broken. Hope. The irony was not lost on David, who just in Harago had discovered that his wife Sarah had been having an affair with Marcus for 6 months. The same Marcus who now controlled his $200 million company, David Harrison had built an empire from scratch. At 42, he owned one of Fellergest financial consulting firms in New York, was married to a socialite who appeared in magazines, and lived in Appenhouse in Manhattan. Or at least had been until 3 hours ago when his secretary, Jessica, the only person Heckle still trust, had discreetly placed a flash drive on his desk with evidence of something that would change everything. Don't you have any family? David asked, sitting down on the edge of fountain beside her. Not anymore, said Hope, her small hands organizing some coins inside a plastic cup. But I have faith. And sometimes that's enough. At that moment, David's phone rang. Marcus, he answered, putting it on speaker without realizing it. David, I hope you're enjoying your last afternoon as a rich man. Marcus's voice sounded smug, arrogant. Sarah and I are celebrating our new partnership in every sense of the word, if you know what I mean. Hope watched David's face contort with anger and pain. When he hung up the phone, she reached out her small hand toward his. Can I pray for you now? For some reason he couldn't explain, David nodded. When Hope closed her eyes and began to speak with a peace he hadn't felt in years, something strange happened. The tears he had held back all afternoon finally began to fall. God, you know David's heart. He's hurt and lost, but I know you have a plan. Help him find the strength to do what's right, even when everything seemed shapeless. What Marcus and Sarah didn't know was that David Harrison wasn't just a successful businessman. Before building his empire, he had been a financial investigator, specializing in corporate fraud. And the flash drive Jessica had left on his desk contained more than evidence of betrayal. It contained the key to exposing a money-laundering scheme that connected Marcusto international cartels. As Hope finished her prayer, David felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: absolute clarity. His enemies had made the fatal mistake of underestimating Eamon, who had spent 10 years hunting white-collar criminals. There, in front of that child who offered hope when the world was falling apart, David realized that he wasn't just facing personnel betrayal. He was facing the opportunity to expose a criminal network that had been operating for years. If you're wondering how a simple prayer can change the fate of a betrayed millionaire, subscribe to the channel to find out how David turned his apparent defeat into the perfect trap. When David arrived home that evening, he found Sarah packing her most expensive jewelry in the living room. She didn't even bother to look embarrassed when she saw him. Oh, you're back, she said without looking up from the safe. Marcus told me about the meeting. Apparently, you're in it as indispensable as you thought. David watched the woman he had shared 10 Years of marriage with act as if he were an inconvenient stranger. When did it start, Sarah? The affair with Marcus. If you want the truth, David, she replied with a coldness he had never seen before. It started the day I realized I had married a coward. Marcus has ambition. You've been content to just be comfortable. At that moment, David's phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. I hope you're enjoying your last night in the penthouse. Tomorrow, Sarah and I will be celebrating our new partnership in your bed. P.S. Thanks for building the company. I'll take good care of her. The calculated cruelty of that message hit David like a punch in the stomach. Marcus wasn't just stealing his companion, his wife. He was reveling in every moment of humiliation. Did you show him more intimate conversations? David asked, referring to the private messages they had exchanged over the years. Her silence was answer enough, but what really broke David's heart was finding, thrown in the trash, the photograph of when they adopted Max, Fedek they had lost to cancer the previous year. Sarah had torn the photo in half, separating her and David, keeping only her part. While Sarah continued packing, David discreetly photographed some documents she had left lying around. Property transfer agreements, prenuptial agreements she thought he had forgotten, and more interestingly, receipts from a private investigator she had hired months ago to look into his finances. By the way, Sarah said, closing Fella's suitcase, you can keep the country house, Marcus says. It's too isolate for our taste. We prefer the social life of Manhattan. That night, alone in the apartment that would soon no longer be his, David did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the personal file he kept locked in the safe. Inside were his VP certificates, medals of recognition, and most importantly, his private investigator's license, which he had kept active just in case. David Harrison wasn't just a successful businessman. For 10 years, he had been one of the most effective agents in the financial crimes division. His specialty is infiltrating criminal organizations and money laundering. He had left Febro to build a normal life with Sarah, but his skills had never really gone away. The flash drive Jessica had left behind didn't just contain evidence of Marcus' conspiracy. It contained suspicious transactions David had noticed over the past 6 months, but had attributed to aggressive new investments. Now, looking at it with an investigator's eye, he could clearly see a money laundering pattern connecting Harrison and associates to Mexican cartels. Marcus had used David's company as a front for criminal operations. And no, he was eliminating the only person who could expose him, but there was one problem with Marcus' perfect plan. Hadn't know who he was messing with. The next morning, David returned to the square where he had found Hope. She waits there in the same spot with her sweet smile and that inexplicable peace that had touched him so deeply. How are you feeling today? Hope asked as if they were old friends. Different, David replied, sitting down next to her. Your prayer worked in a strange way. It helped me see things more clearly. God sometimes answers prayers in ways wouldn't expect, Hope said, organizing some coins in the cup. Sometimes he doesn't take the problem away, but he gives you strength to deal with it. David watched this 8-year-old talk about faith with a depth most adults never achieve. Hope, can I ask you something? Do you really believe that bad people can change? I believe that good people can stop letting bad people hurt them. Hope replied, looking him straight in the eye. Sometimes God uses good people to teach bad people lessons. In Fatment, David realized that this child had just given him not only hope, but moral permission to do what needed to be done. Each new humiliation from Marcus and Lee strengthened something inside David that his enemies couldn't see. A quiet determination, fueled by the very injustice they sought to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of cruelty was signaling their Own death warrant written by Simeon, who had spent a decade hunting criminals far smarter than them. 3 days later, David was sitting in an inconspicuous cafe in Brooklyn, far from the prying eyes of Manhattan. Jessica Chun, his secretary of 8 years, slid a brown folder across the table, her hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, looking around nervously. "If Marcus finds out, I copied these files." "He won't find out," David assured her, opening the folder. "And Jessica, thank you. You're the only person I can trust right now." The contents of the folder were devastating bank transfers of $68 million to shell accounts, fraudulent contracts with companies that didn't exist, and most shocking, direct communications between Marcus and Lorenzo Vega, a well-known man with connections to Mexican cartels. "David," Jessica said, her voice low but firm, "there's more. Marcus doesn't know I have access to his personal emails. He uses the same password for everything since college. The name of the dog you guys had in your dorm." "Buster 1998, David muttered, Abbott's smile forming. He had helped Marcus choose that password 24 years ago. Jessica nodded and pulled out ASICon flash drive. "It's all here. Conversations with Sarah planning how to remove you from the company. Emails with lawyers discussing how to forge the tax fraud documents, and most importantly, she hesitated. What threats? Marcus is planning to frame you for money-laundering. If you try to fight the dismissal, he's going to plant evidencia in your computer." David felt the blood rain from his face. Marcus wasn't just stealing his life. He was setting him up for a trap that could send him to prison for 20 years. That afternoon, David returned to the square where Hope Usato hang out. She was there as usual, but this time she wasn't alone. A black woman in her 40s, clearly her mother, stood beside her. "David." Hope waved, smiling. "This is my mom, Angela." Angela studied David with protective eyes. "Hope told me about you. She said, you're going through a difficult time. Your daughter has a special gift." David replied, sitting down next to them. "She came into my life just when I needed her most. Hope has always been like that," Angela said, running her hand through her daughter's hair. "Ever since she was little, she's been able to sense when Simeon is hurting." David watched the mother and daughter, noticing how Angela protected Hope without stifling her generous nature. "Angela, may I ask, how did you end up on the street?" Angel's face hardened. "My ex-husband. He left U.S. with huge debts and disappeared. We lost our apartment 3 months ago. I'm trying to save up for a deposit, but with Hopetto take care of." "I have a proposal," David interrupted. "I know the owner of some properties. I can help you find a temporary place with no deposit." Angela looked at him suspiciously. "And what do you want in return?" "Honestly, Hope gave something I couldn't find on my own. Hope, let me repay you for that." As they talked, David's phone rang. Marcus again. This time, David answered with studied calm. "Marcus. David, my old friend." Marcus' voice dripped with false friendliness. "I hear you've been around town. I hope you're not doing anything reckless." "Like what?" "Well, you know how rumors say. Some people might get the wrong idea if you started spreading stories about our company. Especially consider your delicate legal situation." The threat was clear. David looked at Hope, who was watching him with those wise eyes. "Marcus, you've known me for 24 years. Have you ever seen me do anything reckless?" "Never, which is why I'm trusting you to be sensible now. By the way, Sarah sent your regards. She's very happy about our new partnership." When David hung up, Hope touched his arm gently. "He's afraid," she said simply. "How do you know?" "People who do wrong. Things always get afraid when they think they're going to be found out. That's why they get angry and make threats." Angela looked at her daughter with admiration. "Hope is right. I've seen it many times. That night, David worked late in his old home office, which Sarah had left untouched in her rush to leave. He had set up a command center of sorts, connecting information from Jessica's flash drive with his own company files. The pattern was becoming clear. Marcus had started illegal operations 2 years ago, shortly after David had casually mentioned that he was thinking of reducing his active involvement in the company to focus on philanthropy crux. Marcus had interpreted this as an opportunity. But there was a problem with Marcus' plan. Every fraudulent transact had gone through the system that David had personally designed with tracking protocols that were nearly impossible to detect. Marcus thought had covered his tracks, but David knew every backdoor, every hidden log fee system maintained. The phone rang. Jessica, David, you need to know. Marcus just scheduled a meeting with Lorenzo Vega for tomorrow in the office. He's transferring the last of the company sets to offshore accounts before Inian can investigate. What time? 2:00 p.m. David, they're talking about eliminating you as a potential problem. I don't know exactly what that means, but I understand. Jessica, you need to get out of the company tomorrow. Make up an excuse, anything. I don't want you anywhere near what's about to happen. After hanging up, David did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He dialed a number he knew by heart. Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI, Financial Crimes Division. His former partner, David Harrison, said the familiar voice. I hear you've become a successful businessman. Sarah, I need a favor. And before you say no, it involves money laundering for Mexican cartels. There was a pause. I'm listening. I need equipment. Bugs, cameras, and I need a team ready to go tomorrow at 2:00 in the afternoon. David, you're no longer an agent. No, but I still have my private investigator's license, and I have evidence of a $68 million operation that you're going to want to see. The next morning, David met Hope in the square for the last time before executing his plan. She and Angela were packing their few possessions into a backpack. Today is going to be an important day, Hope said, looking him straight in the eye. How do you know? Because you're different. You have the same look my mother had when she decided to take use away from my father. It's the look of someone who's going to do the right thing, even though it's hard. David knelt in front of her. Hope, I want you to know that finding you changed my life. No matter what happens today, you gave me back something I thought I had lost. What? The memory of who I really am. Hope smiled and for the last time placed her small hand on his forehead. God, protect David today. Help him do what's right and bring justice to those who have done wrong. As David stood up and walked toward what would be his final confrontation with Marcus, he carried not only enough evidence to destroy a criminal empire, but also the quiet certainty of someone who had rediscovered his purpose. What Marcus and Sarah couldn't see was that every act of betrayal and cruelty had unleashed a weapon they themselves had placed in the hands of someone trained by the FBI to use exactly that kind of ammunition. At 2:00 sharp, David entered Harrison and Associates building for the last time as its owner. He carried in a discreet briefcase and the small book agent Sarah Mitchell had given him. A microscopic transmitter and camera that would record every word off meeting. David. Marcus rose from his chair, the chair that had been David's for 15 years, with a fake smile. What a surprise. I thought you were adjusting to your new situation. Next to Marcus stood Lorenzo Vega, a 50-year-old man with poorly concealed tattoos on his neck and a suit that cost more than most people earn it in a year. David recognized him immediately from the photos in the FIBA file. Marcus Lorenzo. David greeted them calmly. I hope you don't mind my unexpected visit. I needed to pick up a few personal items. Lorenzo studied David with predatory eyes. Is this the old partner you told me about? The one who could cause problems. He was, Marcus replied, emphasizing the past tense. David has always been very accommodating. He never had the stomach for the more lucrative business. David smiled, opening his briefcase. Funny you should mention that, Marcus, because I brought some documents I'd like to discuss with you. Marcus's expression changed instantly when David placed copies of bank transfers, emails with Lorenzo, and fraudulent contracts on Feedable. Lorenzo's face hardened like stone. Where did you get these? Marcus whispered, the blood draining from his face. The same place I've always kept my important files, David replied calmly. You remember, Marcus. I've always been very meticulous with documentation. Lorenzo stood up abruptly. If you think you can blackmail us, blackmail? David interrupted, his voice still calm. Lorenzo, I didn't come here for blackmail. I came here for a confession. Marcus frowned. What confession? Mine. David looked directly into the eyes of his former best friend. I confess that I spent 10 years as a federal agent specializing in financial crimes before founding this company. I confess that my accounting system was designed with tracking protocols that you never detected. And I confess that this conversation is being broadcast live to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorenzo instinctively reached for his fist, but stopped when he saw David shake his head. I wouldn't recommend that, Lorenzo. There are snipers positioned in the building across the street. An agent surrounding the building as we speak. Marcus was hyperventilating. David, you don't understand. They'll kill me if this gets out. You can't. I can. And I am. David replied, his voice still controlled. Marcus, you destroyed 24 years of friendship. You destroyed my marriage. You tried to destroy my life, and worse, you used my company to launder money for murderous cartels. David, please, Marcus begged, tears beginning to form in his eyes. We've been brothers since college. We can work this out. Brothers, don't do what you did. At that moment, the door opened and Agent Sarah Mitchell entered with 6 armed federal agents. Lorenzo Vega, Marcus Webb, you are under arrest for money-laundering, tax fraud, and conspiracy to commit organized crime. Lorenzo tried to run but was immediately immobilized. Marcus collapsed into his chair, putting his hands over his face. David, he moaned, my career is over. My reputation just like you tried to do to me. David replied, watching the handcuffs being placed on his former best friend. The difference is you deserved it. As Marcus was led away, he shouted, Sarah gets everything. She planned this with him. David smiled for the first time in weeks. Actually, Marcus, Sarah is being arrested at this very moment at the apartment. The conversations where you planned to frame me were all recorded. Jessica was a very cooperative witness. The look of utter horror on Marcus' face was more satisfying than David had imagined. In a matter of minutes, the man who had orchestrated his destruction was being led away in handcuffs, screaming like a child. Agent Mitchell approached David. 68 million recovered, connections to 3 Mexican cartels dismantled, and enough evidence to keep them locked up for decades. Good work, Harrison. As the office emptied, David stood alone in the place he had so carefully built. His phone rang. Jessica, Mr. Harrison. I just saw the news. Marcus and Sarah were arrested. Yes, Jessica. And there's something you should know. The board of directors held an emergency meeting an hour ago. With Marcus under arrest for federal crimes, all of his administrative acts over the past few months have been nullified. You are speaking to the reinstated president of Harrison and Associates. That means that on Monday morning, we have a company to rebuild right this time. That afternoon, Davy returned to the square where he had met Hope. She was there as always, but now she had an even bigger smile. Did you to do what you needed to do? She asked. I did. And Hope? I want you and our mother to know that I'm going to set up a scholarship fund for kids like you who deserve every opportunity and thrilled. Hope hugged him. I knew God had Applin. As the sun set over Manhattan, David Harrison realized that the greatest revenge had not been destroying Marcus and Sarah. It had been rediscovering who he really was. But the story was far from over, because every great victory for justice creates ripples that transform many more lives than just those directly involved. 6 months later, David Harrison sat in his renovated office, watching the hustling bustle of Manhattan through the window. Harrison and Associates was no longer just a financial consulting firm. It had become a corporate investigation company specializing in exposing fraud and protecting small investors. The phone rang. Jessica, Mr. Harrison, the New York Times is on line 1. They want an interview about the Harrison Webb case. David smiled. The Harrison Webb case had become a milestone in the fight against corporate money laundering. Marcus was serving a 25-year sentence in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Sarah had lost everything. Her penthouse, her jewelry, even her high society friends who abandoned her when scandal broke. Tell them I'll do it, but on one condition. I want them to include information about our new educational foundation. The Hope Foundation, named in honor of the girl who had changed his life, had already awarded full scholarships to 200 low-income children. Hope herself was now attending one of New York's best private schools, living with her mother, Angela, in an apartment David had bought for them. That afternoon, David visited Hope at school. She ran up to him with a beaming smile, carrying an essay she had written. David, I won first place in school essay contest. What did you write about? About how a prayer can change the world, Hope replied, her eyes sparkling. I wrote about you. David felt a lump in his throat. Hope, you saved my life that day. No, you saved yourself. I just asked God to show him the way. Angela approached them looking elegant in her new job as the foundation's coordinator. David, I have news. 30 more families signed up for the Housing Assistance Program this week. Perfect. And how's our project with ex-convicts going? 5 people have gotten jobs through the program. One of them told me yesterday that it's the first time in 10 years she's felt useful again. As they walked through Central Park, Hope asked a question that touched David deeply. Are you still angry with Marcus and Sarah? David thought for a moment. No, Hope. Actually, I'm grateful to them. Grateful? Because if they hadn't tried to destroy him, I would never have rediscovered his fee. I would never have found you and our mother. I would never have created a foundation. Hope nodded with her characteristic wisdom. Sometimes God uses bad people to get us to good places. That evening, David received an unexpected phone call. It was Dr. Phillips, Marcus' lawyer, informing him that his former partner had attempted suicide in prison and was asking to speak with him. David drove to federal prison the next day. Marcus wasn't recognizable, thin, pale, the arrogance completely gone from his face. David, Marcus whispered through the glass, I've destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, 24 years of friendship. You made your choices, Marcus. I know, but I want you to know that I regret it. Not just getting caught, but what I did. You didn't deserve that. David looked at the man who had been his best friend, now broken and remorseful. Marcus, I forgive you for your crimes. That's in the hands of the law. But I forgive you for our broken friendship. Marcus began to cry out, how can you forgive me? Because an 8-year-old girl taught me that holding into anger is like holding on to poison. And because I've learned that the best. Revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, it's building something greater than they could ever imagine. A year later, David stood on stage at Lincoln Center speaking at the graduation ceremony for the first class of young people from the Hope Foundation. In the audience, along with Hope and Angela in the front row, were hundreds of families whose lives had been transformed. 2 years ago, David said into the microphone, "I thought I had lost everything. Today, I realize that it was in that moment of apparent feat that I found my true purpose." Hope waved to him from the audience, her smile lighting up the entire theater. The true measure of success is not how much money we accumulate, but how many lives we touch positively. The best revenge against those who tried to destroy us is to become the people they could never be. When David stepped off the stage, Hope ran up to him. "I'm proud of you," she said, hugging him. "I'm proud of us too," David replied. "Of everything we've built together today, David Harrison is one of the most respected corporate investigators in the country. Marcus is serving his sentence in silence, having exhausted all legal remedies. Sarah works as a waitress in New Jersey after all her wealthy friends abandoned her. David's sweetest revenge wasn't destroying his enemies. It was proving that dignity, integrity, and compassion always won out over greed and cruelty. And it all started with a simple prayer from a little girl who believed in second chances." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways and that true strength lies in turning our worst defeats into our greatest victories.